Record to cloud. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Art 186, Computer Graphics with Adobe Illustrator for the spring semester 2022. Today we're going to be working on Lesson 9, which covers the topic of layers. As you can see, I won't say that the lesson that they have constructed is bad, but I think there's a better way of approaching layers. Layers are nothing more than a way of organizing your artwork. Since in Illustrator, since it is a vector/object-oriented program, everything that you create is a separate object. So before you know it, you're going to have just tons and tons of shapes that you're not going to know what to do with, or which one you want to select, or how to select it, or how to find it. So what we do is we typically use layers to organize and structure our illustration to help keep things kind of tidy and make it visually the way we want. Okay. So what we're doing right now is, if you're looking at the screen here, is we're looking at a mock-up for an app that we would see for a phone that would maybe to purchase shoes. This is hiking shoes. It's a nice looking app, but if we look, this is what the finished one looks like. And when we close it up, I have layers open here. And if you don't have layers open, it's typically this bottom one right here. Let me go ahead and put this back in here. Come on. Let me go ahead and come on. There we go. So I'm just moving it back over into, I didn't want it there. I want it inside here. There we go. That's where layers usually is, right down here. And again, the simplest way of thinking of layers is just a stack of paper. What is at the bottom, of the layers stack, it would be at the bottom of a stack of piece of papers, and whatever is at the top is at the top. So if you're not careful, things can be hidden if they lie underneath a layer that you can't, that's covering something else up. So I'm going to click and open it, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tear off the layer just so we can see it. And when we're all done with this exercise, you can see that we really only have two layers. We have the navigation copy at the very top, which is what this is. So if I turn that off, you can see what we have. That's a copy of what we have over here. So really, they've condensed everything to a single layer. The bottom layer down here is the image of the phone body. If I turn that off, let's go ahead and unlock that and turn that off. No, you can't see. So anyway, the phone body is nothing more than the background image, the template for the size of the design that we're creating. But what they've done is they've put everything on a single layer, and contained within that layer are a bunch of sub-layers, groups, and additional images that I don't find it any easier to navigate and to figure out what's going on here. So I'm going to leave it to all of you guys to muddle I've done it myself, but to muddle your way through the exercise and to work backwards. That's basically what you're doing. They've already constructed an illustration or a design, and now they're saying once it's constructed, let's organize it. That's sort of working backwards, as it were. Typically, the way you do work with layers is as you're constructing an illustration or design, then you are organizing it, not waiting until the very end and putting things into groups and layers and sub-layers as needed. So if we look at their original file here, this is the start file over here. Okay, it doesn't look any different, really, for the most part. The only thing that we have to put, there's a few elements that we need to put in here, but you can see that we have the photo that goes in here, and we're going to use a clipping mask because right now it's on top of everything. But I would rather show you instead, since everybody's working on the skateboard assignment, the Tokidoki assignment, how I would approach it and how I approach my layers. And today may only take another 20 minutes. So we'll cut it short at maybe a half an hour, but we'll see, because I'm not going to construct an entire skateboard deck, but I'll show you how I would approach it. And, obviously there's times when I would modify things and make it slightly different, but this is how I start out with a file. And it's just my working, the way that I work. Doesn't mean that you have to work that way, but it's worked for me for a while. So if I click over here, here's Untitled 2. You can see that I have an 11 by 17 document. How do I know that? Because if I go back over to transform, or if I look at the top and let's see, I look at the, let's deselect that. And let's look at our document itself, and it's in inches. And if we want to edit the artboard, we can. But trust me, if I go back in here, you can see that the width is 11, the height is 17 inches. Now I can leave this vertically. I can also work with a horizontal format for you guys, but I'm just going to work with 11 by 17 right now. And I'm going to make one single skateboard deck for all of you. But this is how I would approach it. We start with one layer 1, and I'm going to name it background. Or in fact, what I should name it, background is what is typically used in Photoshop, but I'm going to name it template. Okay. And I downloaded this image from the web. Okay. That gives us the basic proportions and size of a kind of tongue depressor looking skateboard deck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hold down the shift key, and I'm going to rotate it. By holding down the shift key, it rotates it in 45-degree increments of 45 degrees. And now I can go ahead and I can move this, kind of center this, and I can go ahead and hold down the Option and the Shift key and enlarge it in here. And if it looks sort of gnarly afterwards and sort of pixelized, it doesn't matter, because we're just using it as a guide and nothing more, nothing less. Now, one of the other things that I like to do is I like to have some basic guidelines for myself so that I can organize it, and I get kind of persnickety about that when I'm working on projects, is to make sure that everything is centered. It doesn't have to be, but I like it that way in case I decide to do something with it a little bit differently later. So to bring out those guidelines, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit Command R to bring out the rulers. And rather than leave it on the template layer, this would be a time that I would create a brand new layer. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll name it Guides. Okay. Now, you don't have to do it that way, but typically the guides sit on top of everything. And you can hide guides, you can lock guides, you can do whatever you want. But if I put them on their own layer, then what I can do is I can easily lock them, unlock them, and then I can turn them on and turn them off as needed. So right now what I want to do is I want to find the center of my document. So as I said, it's 11, so that would be 5.5. That's 5.5. So here's the center, vertical center, and I'm going to find the horizontal too. So half of 17 would be 8.5. So I'm going to go 8.5. Actually, no, that's not right. Half of 17 is There's 8 and 8 is 16. Oh, I went the wrong direction. Sorry, that's 7, that's 9, that's 8.5, because that didn't look right. Okay, now if I go over this, you can see that it automatically allows you to move. I can lock the guides and deselect them, and they become objects in and of themselves. And I like using those from time to time. But if they're on their own layer, I can lock them, and I can turn them off and turn them back on as I need them. So that would be, for me, another reason to use guides. This, in fact, isn't a true template layer yet. But what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this about so that I get it centered. And I'm going to move that up a little bit. I'm just going to use my, there you go. I'm using my arrow keys to nudge it in place. And I'm using the little handles on the left and right and top and bottom to center it. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to turn it into a true template. So by going ahead and double clicking on, the layer, what I want to do is if I say template, click on that, it will automatically dim the image to 50%. We've done this before. It will make sure that it does not print. It by default locks it. I do want it to show, and we're using blue as the guide layer. It really doesn't matter. You can make it any color you want. So I'll click OK. And now it's locked. And it's tinted back a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is a different kind of guide for myself that I'll probably use later on to use as a clipping mask, is that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trace this. So what I'm doing in some respects is very similar to what Simone Legno did and the Tokidoki assignment, but I'm going to use fewer images than he did, because he already had a library of them and I don't. So, but I'll get you to, designing a basic skateboard deck. So I like the curvature tool. So I'm going to go ahead here and select it. And I can't work on the template layer, and I don't want to work on the guide layer. So this would be another reason to create another layer. And I'll just name this layer artwork. Okay. And later when I work with typography, and remember I said that you need to incorporate typography into your skateboard design, I typically put that on a separate layer as well. And that layer will be just below the guide layer. Now, does it have to be always in that place? No, because sometimes you'll have objects layered on top of type or whatever, but more often than not, type sits on top of everything else. And so that's where I typically put it if I need a copy of it, or if I need a single part of a piece of text that is going to lie underneath some of the images that I use, then I can do that. I can move that to a separate layer. But you want to make note of it. And again, layers are nothing more than means for organizing what you're working on, so that you don't accidentally go ahead and, say that I want to work and you're accidentally clicking and moving guidelines or moving the template and stuff, that you want to be able to work smoothly, efficiently, and accurately, So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to pull down, and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here, and you can see it isn't really matching, and that's okay. Not all of it anyway. So I'm going to have to come back and make some adjustments. Okay. So right now I don't have green, but I don't have any stroke or any fill. So just to help me out a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and make a black stroke. 1 point, could be 2 points. You really don't need anything more than that. And now I'll zoom in, and I'm going to refine that edge. Okay. So what I want to do again with the curvature tool is I'm going to move it over. I'm going to work on one of the anchor points here until it fits the underlying shape. And this is off a little bit, so I need to move that a little, and that fits really nicely. I'm going to move this one up as well, right about the same place as the other one. That looks pretty good. I'll move this one up, and because this is still curved, I'm going to go ahead and double click on it so that it's straight. Let's go ahead and move this down or up until it fits nicely. There we go. So it's getting pretty close. Let's double click on this one. Make that nice straight line, and let's move the anchor point here until it follows the curve. So I'm just playing with this until it fits nicely. And that's a pretty close fit. If you want to get really precise, you can, but with the outer definition of the skateboard deck, it doesn't have to be super duper precise, because typically when you are going to print it, you need to have a minimum of a 1/8 inch overhang. You can see this little guide out here, so that it's actually called a bleed, so that when they print, if they're off just a little bit, you're not going to see the edge of the skateboard deck at all. It will end of your the end of your design. It will print all the way to the edge. That's the whole point of that. But this is right now. I can always enlarge that later on. So this is the artwork. But what I want to do is I want to probably lock this one too. So I'll call this guide, not guide, but I'll call it outer shape. So I'm going to go ahead and instead of artwork, I'll just name it outer shape or outer, I don't know, outer shape for right now. It doesn't sound right, but anyway, you get the idea. And I'll lock it for the time being. I want to make it visible. I don't want it invisible. And I want to lock it. There we go. And now I'm going to go ahead and with this outer shape selected, I'm going to go ahead and on top of this, add another layer. And as I said, since maybe I already know what kind of type I'm going to use, that let's go ahead and work with that. Let's say that it's principally a abstract design that I'm going to make with very little representational images and with some type on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name this one my type layer. And for, many designs, and if you go back and watch the Tokidoki video again, you'll see that he used very few layers. But again, the one that the textbook has provided, I find gets a little bit, it's more complicated than it needs to be. And I would probably organize it differently if I were building it. Now, since I've created this outline shape, if I find that to be sort of a nuisance, I can always turn off the template. And I have my basic shape there to work from so that that background doesn't become an issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let's start at the bottom. And for some guidance here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some type. And I'm just going to make it in the center. And we'll start with Myriad Pro is the guide. Where is it? I want this to be centered. So if I bring up, let's move this down. I'm thinking Photoshop for some reason, and I don't want the paragraph. Well, let me go and bring up the character panel and the paragraph panel. So if I go back over here, let's go to Windows, and I'm going to go down to Type, and I'm going to bring up character. There we go. Now I'll move this over here. And let's look at the paragraph real quick. And I want it to be centered. Now, normally with Photoshop, that would be up here, available to me as well in the options panel here. So I'll click here, and I'm going to use my logo here. Or the name of my company, which is Kmart 66. So I'll do Kmart. And I'm going to make 66 a little bit different a little bit later. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. Zoom in. I know it's really, really small. So I'm zooming in here. And if you recall from what we did with our type, I can go ahead and I can stretch this because it's point type right now. And my computer is starting to get really sluggish. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to go to View. And I'm going to go to Green View Proof, zoom out. I need to go to, used to be percentage here. I want to go to, they've changed things. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and go zoom in. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit again. I'm hitting Command plus, because if I try to do this just using my finger on my touchpad, it's not working. I'm just going to leave it at that. So I'll go ahead and move over the corner of it, hold down the Shift and the Option key, and make it considerably bigger. And I want it to be kind of bold. At least I want the K and the M to be bold. So I'll highlight these. Is this the type that I would use? I don't know. But I'm going to select, instead of regular, I'm going to go with bold italic. Okay. And for right now, I'm going to leave it black. And with the type selected, what I want to do is I want to add, to make it fit the curvature of the skateboard a little bit more, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make it with warp. And let's see what I can do to fix that. And again, I've got it on a separate layer here. So come on. It's probably taking a minute for it to pop up. Come on, come on, come on. Why aren't you popping up? Well, let me go over to our properties panel and see if I can work with it there. Why aren't you showing up? Let's go ahead and deselect that and then try again. Okay, let me try over here then. I'm going to go Object, and I want to go to Text Warp, and I want to go to Make. I don't want that. I selected the wrong thing. So let me try again. Let's go again to Object. And let's go, not Text Wrap. I want, where's our rope? Envelope distort. That's what I wanted, with Make with Warp. Okay. So now the dialog box pops up. Now I don't want that. That doesn't help me. I could go in the opposite direction. I don't like the look of that. So let's try a different one other than arc. Maybe the shell lower would be kind of work, or maybe the shell upper. No, I don't like either one. So let's try something else. Let's try bulge. That might be kind of nice. So what I want to do is There we go. Do I like this? Not particularly, but for our, our purposes here to get something going, it's not a bad approach. So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and click OK. That's good for right now. And let's go ahead and move it into position. So right now it's centered, but I'm going to go ahead and move it down a little bit into place. And now what I want to do is I want to zoom out a little bit, and I want to consider maybe putting some sort of image in the backdrop here. What I'm going to do is I want to put I'll just work with a rectangle for starters, and I want to put a pattern in here, some sort of pattern. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a rectangle. Now I'm not going to worry about the pattern fitting the shape just yet, because I'm going to use a mask to make the pattern fill inside just that shape. So for right now, I have type, but what I want to do is I'm going to create another layer too that is below the type layer, but it's above the outer shape layer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit plus. And this one I do want to be the artwork. So I'll name it artwork. So you can see with layers, that's what this whole exercise is supposed to be about, that as I'm gradually building my design, I'm organizing it so I can come back to it and edit it and manipulate it and put it into the, organize it in a way that works best for me. So what I'm going to do now is just name that artwork. And I'm not going to worry about, as I said, that outer boundary. I'm just going to make a rectangle and make sure that it's bigger than the background. Come on. Let's go ahead here and pull that down. And you'll be able to see in a minute that it's already behind the text. It's above that shape that I'm using as a guide, but you'll see why I'm doing that in a minute. So what I can do is I can either paste it inside that shape, which isn't a bad idea, and paste all, build my my skateboard deck and paste it on top of all those. And maybe in the time, for the time being, what I should do for that outer shape, even though it's locked, is I can move it above everything just for right now. And when I'm done with that, so that will serve as a guide for me. But for right now, I'm going to select the inner shape that I want to apply a texture. And I'm going to come back with in the panel, the swatch panel here. And I want to go to my libraries that maybe you guys haven't looked at yet. And I want to look at, let's look at some, I want to look at gradients. I don't want a gradient. I want to look at some patterns here. So let's look at some patterns from foliage, because I'm going to make this about nature. Okay. And let's try some of them, see how they work with this shit. I don't know if they're going to work or not. Select that. Okay. I don't like that. Let's try this one. I don't know. I don't like that one. Let's try this one. It's kind of cool. Let's try the next one. And we can always, we're going to get to patterns pretty soon anyway. Let's try something else here. I'm kind of guessing here. I'm going to have to decide on something in a moment. It doesn't look like that's from nature, but whatever. let's just work with that one. What the heck? That's not what I want. Again, I told you I'm kind of winging this today. I'm going to go with this one. Okay. So there we have it. We have a background pattern that's going to be kind of serve as the glue to create a coherent looking design overall. Okay. So I'm going to leave that in the background just like that, and not worry that it overhangs at all. I'm going to deselect, and let's create some other shapes on top of it. So I might want to use a little bit more text. And so what I'm thinking of is I'm going to use some text that says moving forward, because that seems to be the theme of one of my projects. And maybe instead of a pattern, I could bring in a photograph. That wouldn't be a bad idea. So for one of the what I had used, the image that I had used for a movie poster that I had created for my class, I could use that background image. But right now, let's just leave it a pattern and let's work with that. Let me go ahead and use some more type. So I need, since to keep to my organization here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close, or I'll just move the foliage image patterns. And you might want to notice in your swatch panel, every time you click on one of those, it adds it to your library here. So you don't need to add it again. It will automatically add it. So what I need to do is I'm going to go back to type, and I'm going to do it vertically or horizontally first, then I'm going to rotate it so that it's vertical. So I'm going to go ahead and type it, and I'm just going to move over to the side. And let's see, I want it to be a little bit bigger. We have Myriad Pro, and I'm going to make it much bigger when I'm done. I'm going to go to 24 point for the time being, and click right here. And I want to put moving forward. Okay, now let's go ahead and really make this much bigger. Come on. There we go. So now I can go ahead and really crank this up. Come on. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the type again. And my computer is working so slow. And instead of forward being bold italic, I want it to be just italic. And instead of moving being italic, I want it to be bold. But I want to maybe pick a slab serif for that. So let's select, instead of Myriad Pro, let's click here. And let's select from the groups over to the left and see what's available. Come on. Let's go to the filters. And I'm going to select slab serif right here. That's what I'm thinking of. So I'm just, for the heck of it, let's try this one here, moving. Now, obviously, it's way too big. We can try a different one, Rockwell Extra Bold. That's not bad. Moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and take it, and that's working pretty nicely. Now I'm going to go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees. Hold down the Shift key and move it into position. And obviously it's too big, so we're going to shrink it down. I'm going to zoom back out here. And with it selected, I'm going to hold down the shift key and move it down like so. There we go. Let's zoom in here. And how am I doing on time? I got a little bit more time. Let's go ahead and make sure, using my guidelines, I'm going to center it up. And when it gets kind of herky-jerky, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard to move it a little bit at a time. Let's go ahead and move it up a little bit, zoom in a little. Let's try and move it over. Yeah, my computer now with all of you guys is just really slowing down. Let's move it over. Close enough for government work, right? And let's move it up a little bit. And now what we can do is we can try something a little bit daring that I don't know that I like it at the moment. But what I can do is I can take this shape that I've filled with a pattern, and let's try something that he had done before. I'm going to use the knife to go ahead and cut it into different kind of shapes here to create kind of a forward movement here. And then we can go in and we can change the color of these and work with a pattern in some instances and maybe basic colors in others. And we'll see. And I'm, gradually getting this whole thing together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lock the type layer. I'm going to go back to the artwork. And with that selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the knife tool over here. That should be underneath the eraser. Come on. And I want to use the knife tool. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut right through my shape here. So it's actually 3 separate shapes now. So let's leave the top one as is. Let's go ahead and select the second one, like so. And let's go ahead and fill it with a color. What the heck? Nope, I don't want that. Let me make sure that I have it selected. It might need to select group selection. Or let's try that because it may have left it as a group. There we go. So instead of the whole thing, come on. Let's deselect. Let's select over here. There we go. Now it's selected. So there we go. Is this what I want? Not necessarily. But again, it's for demonstration purposes, just to show you something here. Let's pick a light blue, like so. Okay. So here's the, the crux of my design here. Not perfect, but it's fundamentally, there. It's basically there already. But now what I want to do is I want to put all of this rectangle inside this shape that I constructed from before. So I'm going to go ahead and where I have, it says the outer shape, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move that layer right above the artwork. Because if you're going to use a clipping mask, it has to be right on top of whatever it is that you want to mask. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to twirl down, select that path, and I'm going to move the path into my artwork layer. And that's only because I need it to be able to create the clipping mask. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that whole layer over here where it says artwork. I'm selecting these three pieces. I'm also selecting the outer shape that I created for my clipping mask. And now what I can do is I can go to File, and I want to create, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to Object, and I want to go down here to Clipping Mask, Make. And notice it all fits nice and tidy inside the shape of the skateboard deck, and I'm ready to go. So now technically I have my first skateboard deck designed. I think it should be a bit more, but who knows? It's a start. But again, more to the point of how I have constructed my illustration using layers, and probably what I should have done with the outer shape is I should have made a copy of it, because now it is attached to the artwork as a clipping mask. And you can see here's the clipping group that I constructed. So maybe that wouldn't have been a bad idea, and I can always undo and go back and make those changes. But as I'm constructing it, I'm keeping everything pretty organized. And I've left, as I said, the type on a separate layer. If I wanted some of the type to be underneath another layer, then I could always copy it and move it to a separate layer. But right now, you know, to me, it just makes logical sense to keep them as separate entities until I'm refining the design a bit more. So here's what I have so far. I think for our purposes today, this works okay. It's showing us basically what they have done with the phone. Okay, here's the end for the phone again. And using layers, but they've left us with really one layer, and that's it. And then put other parts in between. I don't like doing it that way because they haven't labeled hardly anything, navigation and phone content. But then when you look under phone content, it's just a bundle of descriptions and shapes and stuff that are really hard to read in a number of other groups that don't make any sense to me. If I'm the person who made the illustration while you're working on it, or the design, I should say, it would make perfect sense. But to hand it over to someone else, and that someone else right now is me, unless I'm following the textbook to the letter, it doesn't make a bit of sense. It really takes time to deconstruct it and to figure out, you know, what shapes and what how they have laid this thing out. And maybe I would organize it a little bit differently than what they did, and I probably would. Okay. So let's go back to our skateboard deck. Now, I hope that this has given you some insight as to using layers. If you need sub layers, you can add that. Okay. This allows us to create content for export. I've never used it. If you know the name of a layer, you can try to locate an object. So if you've been, you know, naming your objects, you can click here and it will help you find them. Okay, and I'll deselect from here. That's what that does. This one here, come on. Let's unlock them all, just for the heck of it right now. If I want to create a new layer, that's this one. If I have a layer selected, maybe I want a subgroup within the type layer, I can do that. You can also create clipping masks from here. Or that's a sublayer, I'm sorry. This is make or release clipping mask. That's what I did. This is a sublayer clipping mask, new layer, and trash can. Throw layers away. Okie doke. So there you have it in a nutshell, how I would approach an illustration / design and use layers to do that and keep everything nice and tidy. And again, if I want to turn guides off now, I can do that. What I would probably want to do is with the type and the outer shape, I don't need the outer shape anymore. I can delete that. But let me just move this down, these two layers. And then when I'm all done, I can select everything, select both layers, and I can move them and rotate them and organize it any way that I want. But for production purposes, rather than put them all on one layer, I would prefer to keep them in just a few layers the way that I have them here. Okay, so we started with a template. We added a guide for the basic shape, and that also served as a clipping mask for us. And then I added some type and put it on a separate layer. We also then started to add our artwork, and the only thing that I added at the moment were a couple of shapes, and I put a pattern in one, and I cut it up and changed the other shapes to different colors. It really needs some work, but again, it's a nice start. Okay. Does that help you guys at all a little bit with the project that you're working on? It wouldn't hurt you guys to look at examples on the web for ideas. So I'm going to bring this down here, and I'm going to look at not just skateboard designs. Okay. So I'm going to go skateboard designs. And we looked at some of these the other day. And again, it's taken forever to load. I apologize, but that's the way it goes. Start with simple and then build complexity into it. Don't try off the bat to make something really complex. It's easier to add than it is to subtract sometimes. Wait a minute, I didn't want skateboard templates. I changed that. Skateboard designs. Let's try that again. And then we'll be done for today. God, while I'm here, everything is just so slow. Does anybody have any questions while we're waiting for this to load? It seems to be taking forever. No, it's just taking too long to load. So we're going to call it a day. And again, I'll have this recording posted within about an hour or so. Okay. No questions from many of you? No. Okay. No. Okay, doke. Well, thank you for attending. Have a good weekend, and I will see everybody on Tuesday. Again, please look at a number of skateboard designs, and I think you'll find some interesting ones to use as a basis for your own. Some will be simple, some will be complex, but again, I think if you start with using layers the way I did to begin my design, it will help you. And here we do. I don't want templates again. It just came up again. It's not working the way I wanted it. So whatever. That's okay. I'm going to say goodbye then. Okay. Have a good weekend. See you next Tuesday. Okie doke. I'm going to turn off the recording now and see everybody later.